Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Summer here to talk about Lesson 205, Linear Equation Word Problems. In today's lesson, students will be able to write an equation from a real-world problem, interpret the x and y intercepts from real-world problems, and evaluate information using equations written from real-world word problems. So there's some steps to solving a linear equation word problem. So the first step is to highlight key information from the text. Define your variables. Then you need to write your equation. And when you do that, you can write you can use whichever form of a line that best represents the context of the question. So in one question, it might be that you use slope-intercept. In another question, it might be that you're using standard form. Or another question might use point slope. You get to pick whichever equation you think best represents the data. And then if the word problem asks you to evaluate for a given set of data, you plug the data into the correct spots of the equation that you wrote and solve. And then finally, you write your answer as a complete sentence, identifying whatever it is asking you to, using units and complete sentences. So these are the key points. You should pause right now, pause the video right now so that you can write these down in your notebooks so that you can have them for your future use. So here's an example of a word problem. It says the admission fee at a small fair is $1.50 for children and $4 for adults. On a certain day, $5,050 is collected. It says, there's 4 parts to this question and says to come up with an equation to describe this relationship. And then what is the x-intercept? What is the y-intercept? And D is if 1,500 children attended the fair, how many adults attended? So my step 1 would be to highlight key information from the text. So my key information would be $1.50 per children. And another piece of information would be $4 for adults. And then my last piece of information is on a certain day, this amount of money was collected. Now, my next step in solving this problem is to define my variables. So what I mean by defining my variables is I need to write let x equal number of children. And then my y variable is let y equal number of adults. And I just moved my defining of my variables up top so that we can have room to write our equation. So now that we've highlighted our information and defined our variables, we can write an equation. So we have some number of children and some number of adults that attended this. And since we already defined our variables, we know that it costs $1.50 for every child x, because we defined a variable x as the number of children. So however many children attended, you multiply that by $1.50 to figure out how much money was collected from the children's fee. Then I'm going to add that to my cost per adult. And then, so some amount of children, each costing $1.50, plus some number of adults, each costing $4 for admission. On a particular day, the total collected from the number of children and the number of adults was $5,050. So there's my equation. Now it says, what's the x-intercept? Well, my x-intercept is what? When y is 0. So if I plug that in, I can get 1.50x plus, we're going to put 0 in for y, is equal to 5050. And now, because anything times 0 is 0, we get 1.50x is equal to 5050. I'm going to divide now both sides by 1.50. And I get x is equal to 3,336.67. But what does x represent? It's number of children. Can you have 0.67 of a child? No. So we're going to round up and we get 3,367 kids. Okay. What does that mean though? What does the intercept mean in the context of this question? It means that if 0 adults attended that day, 0 adults went to the fair, it would mean that in order for the fair to have collected $5,050, 3,367 kids must have attended. So now the question is, what is the y-intercept? Well, we do the exact same thing, but we put in, instead of 0 for y, we're going to put a 0 in for x. So 1.050 times 0 plus 4.00y is equal to 5050. And then I'm going to get my 4.00y is equal to 5050. Well, now I need to divide each side by 4. And I am left with y is equal to 1,262.5. But again, what does our y represent in this situation? It's the number of adults. Can you have half an adult? Not really. So we're going to round up. Y is equal to 1,263 adults. So what does that mean in this context? It means if 0 children went to the fair that day, 1,263 adults must have attended in order for the fair to have collected $5,050. Now, the last part of our question is if the word problem is up here. So this D goes to part 4. If the word problem asks you to evaluate for a given set of data, plug the data into the correct spots in the equation you wrote and solve. So remember, this is the equation that we wrote. 1.50x plus 4.00y is equal to 5050. So now we have 1,500, or as they said, if 1,500 children attended the fair, how many adults attended? Well, our x is the number of children. So I am going to substitute that in. So 1.50 times 1,500 plus 4.00y is equal to 5050. Now I just need to solve for y. So when I multiply 1.50 times 1,500, I get 2250 plus 4.00y equals 550. I am going to subtract 2250 from both sides. And I'm left with 4.00y is equal to 2,800. Now I need to divide both sides by 4.00. And I am left with y is equal to 700. Well, 700 what? Well, in the context of this question, 700 adults. So the complete sentence part would look like, 700 adults attended the fair. Remember to pause this or rewind the video in order to get all of your notes for this example. So here's one that I would like you to try, where it says a landscaping company sells 13 bushes and 4 trees for $616. It asks you to write an equation to describe this relationship. What is the x-intercept? What is the y-intercept? And if a tree costs $63, how much do bushels cost? So remember, you can pause this video right here in order to solve this problem and input your information into the Edpuzzle question. And then I will go over it, how to solve this in the next slide. But make sure you're pausing it in order to complete this question. So let's review this question. A landscaping company sells 13 bushes and 4 trees for $616. I need to highlight my key information. So it sells 13 bushes and 4 trees for $616. So my first step was highlight key information from the text. I did that. So now I need to define my variables. And so I'm going to say, let X equal cost of bushes. And then I'm going to define my Y as let Y equal cost of trees. So I've defined my variables. Now I need to write my equation. So I wrote my equation as 13x plus 4y is equal to 616. Because the number of bushes times the cost of the bushes plus the number of trees times the cost of the trees is equal to the $616 that the landscaping company made. So now, what is my y-intercept? Well, my y-intercept is when what? What is the x-intercept? The x-intercept is when y is 0. So I'm going to start off with this equation, 13x plus 4 times 0 equals 616. Then I'm going to get 13x is equal to 616. I'm going to divide each side by 13. And I get x is equal to 47.38. Well, what does x equal? What did we define x as? Well, the cost of the bushes. So the cost, we can have a decimal, and x is actually equal to $47.38. So what does that represent? What does it mean? It means that if they sold 0 trees, the cost of each bush would be $47.38 for them to still make $616 by selling those bushes. So then what is the y-intercept? The y-intercept is when x is 0. So to solve this, I plugged in 0 for x. So I get 4y is equal to 616. Divide each side by 4. And I'm left with y is equal to 154. And since it's money, because that's what our y variable is, each tree costs $154 if they sold 0 bushes and only 4 trees. So the last part of this question, it says, if trees cost $63, how much does a bushel cost? So I'm on my step 4 over here. If the word problem asks you to evaluate for a given set of data, plug the data into the correct spots in the equation you wrote and solve. So this says the tree costs. So with the tree, if a tree costs $63, well, I need to plug it in for my tree data and then solve for. So to solve this, I multiplied 4 times 63, so I'm left with 13x plus 252 is equal to 616. I then subtracted 252 from both sides. When I was left with 13x is equal to 364, I divided both sides by 13, and I'm left with x is equal to 28. So now I need to do that last step and write my answer in a complete sentence. So my complete sentence would look something like, each bush cost $28. Remember, you can pause this to get all of this the notes down for how to solve this. And you should have written all of this into your notebook, especially if you didn't know how to solve it when it was your turn to try. you should now have all of this information and notes and step by step on how to solve each part of this question, so that when you go to do your learning assignment, you will be able to follow along and follow those same procedures and the same steps that we took with these examples today.